to like match. I have made my very first tank top, or it was supposed to be a vest. The reason I've changed from a tank top to a vest is because the vest was a little bit wider and it's so big. I recommend doing this on the floor or a very large table so you can spread out your bubble wrap. And I've had to tape it together. And I used this bubble wrap for a no-sew felted pillow, which is another video that I need to make still. It's a very nice way to make a pillowcase without any sewing involved. You'll just felt it together and then it'll be done. You can just put a pillow in it. It's really great design. What was next? These clothing items are going to have more drape, and we obtain this drape by using a finer fiber and less layers of fiber. And so we're only going to lay out 2 layers, which is very exciting because the resist is quite large, and so using a lot of layers on such a large resist would be quite time consuming. But what I have done is I have taken a tank top from my closet, a smaller sized one, to see how it turns out. I measured 15 centimeters out from each corner and I put dots 15 centimeters all the way, and then I drew around that, then I cut it out. So you can do that with any tank top or vest in your closet, and if you have a larger space to work with, you could get your bubble wrap out on the floor or your large table and you could lay that all out any size you like. You don't have to do it all in one go, and you can take a break. So it seems I forgot to press record on the first part of the tank top video. I'm just going to start that process now, and it's going to be done in the exact same way as the second half of the video because I just felt that the other one I had made was a little bit too thick. I'm kind of just going to use some random fiber colors, and this one's going to have a little bit more drape. Using that, and we're just gonna see if I can just find more colors that are going to match. A lot of colors do mix with brown. What happens is if it's a dark brown, the color usually ends up staying the same. If you mix primary colors, you might get secondary colors and so on, but I find if you choose a black base or a brown base, you just end up getting the color you choose. I have quite a bit of this pink, which would be quite pretty, but it has some rayon or tencel in it, and I'm just not sure how nicely that felt. This and this, it's too much. And also, I don't want to use a pastel color because what will happen if I use a light color with the brown, it tends to dull the dark color, and so it's just going to make everything look dull. Going for a pastel color, you might want to mix that with another light pastel color, and that will tone everything down and make it look soft. I have quite a bit of purple, which sounds really nice. I have all these colors. I have this one's quite big, it's pink. That would look really cool with the brown, so I could do that. That might be enough to cover a side, and it weighs 173 grams, and so I'll need 173 grams of fiber, and so if there's not enough here, then I'll just have to pick and use a different one. I can't decide which one I should go for. You want to always go with combed fiber or a thin fiber for making garments because it's just going to have that nice drape, and then there's potential that you could use the other fiber to create structural areas. Oh, that's pretty. What a pretty color. And something you might want to do too is I decided to downsize my table so that there's more room in my studio. But I just had the idea that if I'm going to make felt clothing, I thought, why not buy a large piece of wood and just plop it on my table, maybe put a few screws in it for larger projects, and then when I'm done, I could kind of take that off and move it and store it in my garage. And that would just create a bigger table for specific purposes, and then I don't need to live in a situation where I have this massive table all the time in my room that I don't use. It's always fun to use a colorway, a hand-dyed yarn colorway. So now we're going to start the part of the video that I had originally didn't press record for, and we're going to begin laying out our fiber. So when we lay out our fiber for the first side on the first layer, I always make sure to cover the edges about 2 centimeters because we're going to fold those edges over. If you're making small felted projects and you have tight corners, then you want to minimally place the fiber over the edges, but enough so that you have an edge for your garment, because the edge is also included in the entire piece, and when you're done you want your edge to be just as even as the rest of the felted project. I'm going to place the fiber vertically first and then horizontally at the end, so the outside of my project is what we'll see. Some people do it the opposite way, where they put their decorative layer on first and then cover it. Oh, it's so pretty. I have one other Nuno felting video where I lay out the same type of fiber for a scarf, and it's kind of the similar process where you lay it out, you flip it over, and it's only 1 or 2 layers of fiber. It's Nuno felting, and it's a very, very drapey scarf, and it's the same look as what we're going here for this vest. Okay, so something I find with Nuno felting, especially with fine fibers, and if they have silk in it and it's very wispy and delicate, then it sometimes comes up and sticks to everything, and so you can just give it a little bit of a spray with some water just to help it stay in place and not move around. Bubble wrap on top, bubble side down, and first I usually press to push the water into the bowl, and the idea is to fully saturate the fiber. And I also have this little felt pad that I had made, and I like to use these to push the water around, and you don't want to apply pressure, you just want to shimmy it across the bubble wrap and gently push the water throughout the fiber. Carefully and check to make sure that the fiber is fully saturated. And you want to do this quite gently. It helps if the fiber is completely wet to fold your edges over. And I would say I didn't add enough water, and so I'll just go over it again. That it's quite wet now, and so I'm just going to flip it over. Flip it over. So we've done the first side of the first layer, and now we're just going to fold our edges over. And for the second side of our first layer and all other layers, it's the same thing. We don't need to go over our edges for the second side. We just need to fill it in. Bubble wrap, bubble side down, and press. And we're going to flip it over. Carefully lift the bubble wrap up. And we're going to fold over any wispy bits that happen to show up on the edges. So now we've completed our second side on our first layer, and I'm going to go back to the other video that I recorded and continue the layers from there. I place a different color on one side of the garment, and so I end up making a nice neat edge on it. And so that's just an extra tip if you're interested in doing that too. And then we're going to fold our edges over. There might be a few wispy bits on your edges, and you just want to make sure you fold those over as well. It might be fun to do a completely different color on the back side. I could even do yellow solid on one side, and then I could do the colorful fiber on the other side. This pretty green and pink. And I'm a little bit worried that if I put this pink into this green, it could go a little bit brown. I'm thinking like one of these colors for one side, maybe the blue, because I'm just not quite sure how pink will blend with green. I think I'd want to test that, but this is a nice combination. So now we're on the second side doing the second layer, and for the first side of the second layer, I'm going to lay the fiber so it reaches around the edges, going over the edges just a little bit. I've completed the second side, first layer. Let's just give it another spray with water. Really would like to do pink, but pink and yellow, pink and green mixed. Flip it over. Carefully peel. And then we're going to fold over our edges again. So if you did have any holes on your layer before you start the next layer, you may want to just take a look and check around and just see if there's any very thin spots, and just fill those in before you begin covering it with your other perpendicular layer. So now I have laid out my second layer on one side, and I've folded my edges over, and now I'm going to lay out my other color on the other side. This is nice. I'm going to go over the edge with my blue and then do something about that edge after it has been laid out. That sounds more fun to me. So I'm just changing the direction because I'm just making this a one-side color, and it's going to have a nice line shape of a different color on the other side, and I don't want to fold the edges over and kind of have a gradient wispy on the other side that looks messy. I just want like a controlled edge, and so I'm just going to follow the line the entire way around, and then we're going to fix that line up after it's been wet. So now I have laid out the second side to my second layer, and I'm going to spray it down. Bubble wrap on top, bubble side down. And I'm gonna press. That since we're not flipping it over and folding the edges over, we're gonna make a nice refined edge on the other side. And there's a few bubbles in my wool, so I'm just going to flatten those out. And so there's a few options here. I could fold the edges over, or I could cut them. And I think if I cut them, it will leave frayed ends, which will felt into the fiber. And I think if I fold them over, I'll have to be much more gentle and careful to get those folded edges to felt into the other layer. And so my best bet, I think, is going to cut those edges smooth. And I'm just gonna cut away the blue edge so that it's nice and straight. Not too much. So I'm just going to begin agitating all the edges so that the fibers begin to intertwine and attach together, especially those folded over edges. When you fold an edge over like that, then there aren't those tiny fiber filaments to grab onto the other fibers. And so we'll need to really agitate those gently at first for quite some time to get those to stick down. So that completes the layout process. Now we're ready to felt the top. And if you have a felting machine, I recommend using that, but I don't have one. And so I'm going to roll it with my pool noodle until it shrinks down and it's stuck together. And then I'm gonna fold the fiber and I'm gonna give it a little light toss, and I'm gonna shape it into the shape that I want it to be. A cut in it because it's used for some sort of drafting in our house. And so I'm just gonna use that temporarily to roll it, since all my other pool noodles have already been cut quite short. It's just gonna be a pain to have that extra flappy bit while I'm rolling, and hopefully this won't cause too much of an issue. So I like to place my pool noodle right on top of the fabric, not before the fabric. If you roll it up before the fabric, then it's just going to push all of the wool forward and it's going to kind of go out of shape a little bit. And so if you place it on top and begin rolling it up that way. And for all resist felting, you just want to roll, or all felting in general, you want to start off very gently with no pressure and no tight rolling, and you just want it nice and soft. If there are crinkles in your bubble wrap here, it really doesn't matter that much. I found not to make too much of a difference. You can try to straighten it all out if you want to be super nice and neat. You want to add soap before you begin this process, and I have already added soap into mine, and so I think there's probably enough soap, but I'll check it after a few rolls to see if there's suds and if it just needs a little bit more to help the fibers kind of move around and intertwine. Okay, so I rolled 50 times, and I'm going to roll 50 times on all sides. And so I'm going to flip it around in the roll. Then I'm going to unroll it. I do like to straighten everything out before I roll it back up, because the whole thing has crinkled and we want that nice and straight. The felt at least needs to be nice and straight. And I'm just going to pull and make sure there's no crinkles in the wool. I'm going to roll my piece 30 times on each side. I'm going to do another round of 30 to 50 rolls, gentle rolls just like the first round. Stretch it, check it. This edge here is not going to be cut, and so I do want to make it sure it felts nice. Roll it back up. Then I'm going to roll it perpendicular. Flipping, it's just going to help it straighten some things out. This time I'm just flipping the whole project. It's kind of stuck together now, but I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you're sure it's very stuck together and the wool is not flying off, and it's quite fragile still, but it's beginning to stick together and the fibers are beginning to intertwine to one another. So now we're going to roll it. Roll it back up. I'm ready to felt it without the resist inside, and it's starting to wrinkle a little bit, and that tells me that it's ready to be cut and it's becoming a little bit too small for the resist. I'm going to use a sharper scissor just to cut a hole in it. And then if I really love this design, I can keep the resist and use it again. And I'm really not too worried about the cut, if it's a really nice cut or not, because I'm going to recut the edge. And I have cut the resist, but that's okay. I might trim it down a little bit. I'm going to make a proper resist with a proper file and PDF so that we can print it out. This part, I'm going to finally get rid of my bubble wrap, which is my favorite part. We can take it out. Very exciting. And you just want to pull. You just want to gently pull it out. You don't want to pull the felt or anything. It's not quite there yet. It's not quite ready to be aggressive. You still want to be quite gentle. Get my hands in there. Just open that up. And I have flipped it inside out now, and you don't have to flip it inside out. And I like to work these edges and just try to get any crinkles out of those edges. So there's a crease there. I think I might turn it into that boat shape, which I don't really know is a boat. It can be good to get that crease out and just kind of toss it in all directions, roll it in all directions, very gently at this point, because now that the resist is not in it, it's going to felt much more quickly. And to toss. I really like the blue and the yellow more than the green. Roll it a bit more, and then I'm going to apply some warm water on it, or warm to hot water, and get it to shrink a little bit more quickly. And I'm just going to roll it more tightly from all sides. And I don't want to roll it too long before undoing some of the creases that have been made. You can give it a stretch at this point. Once it's all quite stuck together, you can give it a bit of stretch before you begin to roll. And that just opens up the fibers so that there's more space to felt it even further. Now that we've taken our resist out, we do want to check it. We want to open it up and make sure our felt is not sticking anywhere. And it might be a good time now to give it our first cut along some of the edges. That is like a large now. Like, I feel like you could almost wear that. I don't call it finished. The felt's not finished, but like, that is becoming quite nice. But it won't fit me properly, so definitely gonna continue finishing it. Might turn it inside out again. If this turns out, like, I'm going to be making all kinds of wool clothing. And it's starting to felt up quite nice now. And sometimes it can shift a bit, and so I just want to make sure all those lines are the same as the original lines that they were. I recommend making the garment just a little bit bigger than you planned, so you can cut those edges in any shape you want and any way that you would want. Okay, so now it's actually an open tank top. Now that the edges are done, I'm gonna add warm water this time, and I'm gonna add some soap, and I'm just gonna work on these edges and roll the edges like this with my hands. I like to shimmy my edges, but we need more soap and more water to do that. And I like to interchange methods. I like to give it a toss, and I like to roll. Any creases in the garment, I like to also give it a little bit of a slide and felt, slide and felt, slide and full. But that takes a long time to felt, and so we'll just do some more tossing. That shrinks it down really quickly. And the hot water also helps. And I may just roll that on a new towel. Because it'll just help shrink it down a little bit more quickly. So I'm just gonna roll my edges, roll my straps, roll the edges of the straps. The longer you felt the edges, the nicer they're gonna be. Especially if you're gonna leave it. If you're not gonna cut it, if you're not gonna refine it, definitely work on those edges. There's like blue inside and yellow inside. It's a good idea actually to turn it back inside out, and then we have green, quite pretty. Now is just to not shrink it in the width anymore because it is quite narrow. To me it's pretty much done, and so now I'm just doing the finishing touches, whether I want to cut my edge at all and refine